What's up, Commanders fans? The draft is officially done, come and gone, and we're going to get right into it today. How are we feeling? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know on Twitter. First, round one, pick 2, Jaden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. I said a couple months ago that of the main quarterbacks that were talked about, between Williams, JD, and May, and I guess you could throw JJ McCarthy in there if you'd like. I was always the highest on JD. Felt he had the biggest ceiling, or should I say the highest ceiling of all of the quarterbacks when you factor in, hoping that each of them develops into a franchise passer. I think when you combine that hopefulness with what we know Jaden Daniels can do with his legs, we're looking at an MVP type game-changing quarterback. And, I was more than happy with hearing his name called. There was a lot of smoke pre-draft. To be completely honest with you, I thought they were going to choose May. So even with a lot of the local guys coming out about a week or so before the draft saying that, they heard JD was the pick, I was still a little skeptical. Smoke screen season is absolutely real, and that is when it, becomes the hardest to judge what's real and what's not about, 3 to 5 days before the draft. So pleasantly not surprised, but happy with how that shook out. For his career, Jaden played 55 games, came away with 12,750 passing yards, 89 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. He had a career passer rating of 158.4. He rushed for 3,307 yards, 34 touchdowns. As a senior, his big year, he threw for 3,812 yards. He had a 40-4 touchdown to interception ratio, 208 rating. He rushed for 1,134 yards, and he rushed for 10 touchdowns. I understand that some people are a little worried or skeptical of the fact that he did kind of explode as a senior. I think the big thing you're looking for with any player, of course, but more so quarterback, is, the development in their game year by year. How did they progress in every area? And when you look at Jaden's body of work as a college player, I think we saw that in almost every phase of his game, with the exception of his second year in which he only played 4 games. For the most part, you see his passing yards increase. He had a pretty solid rookie year. He almost hit 3,000 yards, and he didn't go for over that until his senior year. But when you look at, the year 2 injury, his second, third year at Arizona State, first year at LSU, and then his senior year, the passer rating increasing. You do see the yards start to go back up. You see the touchdowns go up. You see the interceptions go down. He did throw 3 in LSU in 2022. He threw 4 last year for them. But both of those are a far cry from his last season at Arizona State when he threw for 10. So that's pretty important. I think he did develop every year. He got better every year that he played, and he really worked himself into being the number 2 overall pick. So while I do understand the skepticism of that, I don't think it should be as much of a concern, because when you really think about it, most quarterbacks aren't Andrew Luck, right? So a lot of these guys are going to need development. They're going to need to be worked on for one way or another. One part of their game needs help. Other areas, obviously, they're good at, whatever the case may be. So I think that the Commanders pick the guy that, if you develop him properly, if everything clicks, I don't think that any of the quarterbacks taken have more of a game-changing ceiling than Jaden Daniels. So super pumped with that pick. I think fans are going to be electrified. And I think you're going to see a rejuvenated fan base, especially week 1 or whatever week they do open up at home. But moving on, second pick was, I don't want to say controversial, but I do think it surprised some people. I was one of them at first. I didn't expect them to go interior D-line with defensive tackle, but with the 36th pick, they chose defensive tackle out of Illinois, Jerzon Newton, and kid's a dog. I mean, I love the player, and I'm not saying I don't love the pick. I think a lot of fans get caught up in the now. They're thinking, what do we need for this coming season right now? And while that's important, yes, a lot of the draft is also looking 2, 3, 4 years down the line. Jonathan Allen's getting a little older, so it's never a bad idea to have exceptional talent, even if it's in a position that you weren't super down on by any means. So we know every year teams are going to reach in the first round. And every time a team does reach, that means a guy that was considered a first round talent is going to drop to the second round, to the top of the second round. And, excuse me. And Commanders picking at 36, that's pretty much almost another first rounder, right? So you get a guy that most people had consensus as a first round talent. Some people feel like he's the best defensive tackle in the draft. That is exceptional value and very hard to pass up in an area that, sure, we're strong at, but there's no con to getting better. And you also know that if this pans out, you're set for the next 6 years minimum, somewhere in that ballpark, if everything works out. So I was a little surprised at first, but within a couple of minutes, I was like, "Hey, that's BPA right there," and I respect it. I mean, you're the rebuilding the team from the ground up. I think we're somewhere around like high 30s, low 40s for brand new players on the roster. That's about 80% of your roster that's new. So they're doing the rebuild the right way from the ground up, and it's never a bad idea to get more talent in the building. So I think that anyone that might have been a little on edge or skeptical of the pick on draft night, I think once the tape hits, once he gets on the field week 1, I think some minds will be changed pretty quickly. Moving on, third pick, round 2, pick 50, Mike Sanra-Still. I admittedly did not do as much research on the defensive side of the ball for this draft. We all knew that QB was happening with the second pick. So I felt like they were going to lean more offensive heavy, and to be honest with you, they kind of split it fairly evenly. I mean, they weighted a little more with the exception of these two picks. They went a little more offensive heavy with their top 100, but I mean, I'm pretty pleased that they took a little jab at everything. I mean, it's not that I thought we were fine on defense. It's just that with the fact that we knew QB was coming with pick 2, I had a feeling, O-line was going to be a pick, tight end was going to be a pick. I did have a feeling that running back and wide receiver were both going to be a pick. They did take a wide receiver, which obviously we'll talk about, but not a running back. That one surprised me, and obviously if you do take a back, one of these defensive players are coming off your board. So I was somewhat familiar with Mike. Obviously Michigan was a pretty big story, so it was hard not to know the name, know the player to an extent. I do love what I've seen since the pick. I did a little more digging, and the guy's not the biggest guy in the world, but you wouldn't know that by the way he plays on the field. I mean, he plays like he thinks he's the biggest guy on the field, and he's not just like a glue guy or a does the little things guy. He does, but he's also a pretty talented player. So super excited for that. I definitely see him starting without a doubt. Word has it should be in the slot, but either way, he'll be on the field without a doubt, and I think he's going to make some plays. So very happy with how the draft shook out. I mean, I really wasn't upset with any of the picks, but I mean, these top 5 picks, I think they really nailed them. I'll talk a little bit more about that once we wrap up at least the first 5. Next pick, we go back to offense. Tight end Ben Sinnott out of Kansas. This wasn't obviously like a tight end rich draft. Outside of Bowers, there really wasn't a ton of guys that screamed franchise tight end. But I really like that they went out and got Ben. The tight end position has been shaky, to say the least, for Washington for many years, probably since the Chris Cooley era. I mean, we had Fred Davis as well, so I mean, Vernon Davis had a decent little stretch when he was here way back yonder, but it's been a position that hasn't been very strong for us for a while. I mean, Jordan Reed, can't forget Jordan Reed. Almost forgot my guy, but unfortunately, injuries for him meant that a guy that was extremely talented couldn't always utilize that talent. So it's been really shaky for Washington. Like I said, we've had some guys that are good but can't stay on the field, and then we had some guys that just haven't really cut it. I liked Logan Thomas, but another guy with a lot of injury issues and up and down production. So it's nice to see some more higher investment, I should say. Obviously, they did take John Bates last year in the fourth round. I like John Bates a lot. He didn't show you much as a pass catcher in college, and that carried over to the NFL, but he was a superb run blocker in college, and that did carry over to the NFL. Ben is a guy that he's not as great as a pass block or as a blocker, but he's still a very good blocker. But what he lacks compared to Gates in that regards, he more than makes up for as a pass catcher. For his career, he hauled in 82 catches, 1,138 yards, and 10 touchdowns. His senior year, 49 receptions, 676 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Tight ends are tricky to judge. Obviously, they also went out and signed Zach Ertz, but you could not go into week one with Zach Ertz and John Bates as your only real guys on the roster. That would not have been very good. So I do think that Ben is going to get some opportunities, but it's tricky to judge because, a tight end can really be a safety valve, especially for a young quarterback. I mean, it can be that for any quarterback, but, specifically a young guy, having a guy that you can really rely on that's either open close to you, they're whatever, middle of the field, whatever, you're comfortable with, you work with, but I don't know. I mean, you got Terry, you got Jahan, so I don't think Jaden Daniels is going to be afraid to let that thing rip to anybody when he gets the chance. So I don't know about some crazy stellar year, but I do expect that he will be on the field and potentially even another starter. Probably going to see Zach Ertz as the official starter, at least for week one, unless, Ben absolutely has a monster camp. But that might not hold. We'll see. Moving on, we finally got to the position that a lot of people wanted to take with the second, our second pick, offensive tackle Brandon Coleman at TCU. I love the pick. 6'6", 317, good athleticism, great athleticism actually. He's a guy that some people are questioning if he'll slide to guard. I don't think that's going to be the case. I know we did that with Brandon Sheriff and Sam Cosmi. But Coleman's a bigger body than those guys, longer reach, and I think that his tape as a tackle is better than the tape he has at guard. And again, I don't really think that going into week one, well, I shouldn't say week one, going into camp saying, oh yeah, Cornelius Lucas is the guy, no competition. I like Lucas. He's filled in superb when he's had to do spot duty. When he's had to do some stretches here and there where he's played for a little more than just spot duty, it's like up and down. I mean, he's serviceable. We can get by with him. I know a lot of people were hoping for a substantial upgrade of some sort, especially knowing that we were going to take a quarterback. But I think Coleman has the potential to be pretty good, especially down the line. I mean, you have to weigh the pros and cons of the risk of if you want to try him, but I think that at worst case, he should be competing with Lucas in camp. And I know a lot of people are going to focus on quarterback just because it's quarterback and because it's Jaden Daniels as well. There's really no battle between Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota. JD might be humble saying he has to earn it, but he's QB1. No disrespect to Mariota, who I actually like. I don't think he's terrible by any stretch of the means, but that's no competition. JD's QB1. So I think the most interesting battle for camp, is going to be that left tackle spot between Coleman and Lucas. I think I would prefer to see Coleman win. I just think that it's Lucas isn't your guy, right? So I think it's probably worth it to not just give it to him. If he's not good in camp, I'm not saying throw him out there, but if he does have a good camp, I would start him. I think getting those reps is probably a little more valuable than rolling with Lucas for a couple weeks or making a change. So yeah, if he has a good camp, I would like to see him out there. And with that being said, I genuinely think the first five picks for the Commanders could all start, with the exception of Newton. And Newton could start for most people, but he's not better today. He's not better right now than Jonathan Allen or Daron Payne. So I don't see a path for him to start unless they run a 3-DT formation somehow, or if that's what they want to do. Or if they want to maybe see how someone does more like on the edge, I don't know. But again, I think if we didn't already have Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne on our roster, I think the first five picks for the Commanders could be starting week one. And that is a home run, if you ask me. Now, all of these guys were within the top 100, but they aren't just necessarily, hey, we needed a guy at this position, so we drafted a guy at this position. It, for the most part, was best player available in a lot of instances. I mean, they didn't really reach on anyone with the exception of maybe the next pick. And it's a debate because we don't know what any of these guys' draft boards really look like. But their next pick, round 3, pick 67, was Luke McCaffrey, wide receiver out of Rice. Luke switched from quarterback to wide receiver, so it's kind of harder to judge his development as a wide receiver because there's not a ton of work to judge. First 2 years spent kind of as quarterback, then he was more of like a Swiss Army knife in his third year, and then officially a wide receiver for his fourth year. He earlier in his career he took a lot of snaps out of the backfield. That decreased in his third and fourth year, so it's something that he is familiar with and comfortable with enough to where you could try it. You could get him some snaps out of the backfield, kind of like they did, mixed it in with Curtis Samuel last year, and I wouldn't be opposed to it. I don't know how much time he's going to see on the field. As a senior, he rushed 15 times, 117 yards. He caught 71 catches for 992 yards and 13 touchdowns. There's not really a ton of room for him to produce a ton as a rookie if he even, locks himself in as wide receiver 3. Personally, I would like to see the team trade for Brandon Ayuk, not just because he's some flashy name. I know he's due money, but he's young. But more importantly, Jaden Daniels loves the guy for some reason. I'm not for some reason as in a negative context. It's just, I don't know their personal, I don't know how they got so close. But those guys are really close, and I think that can do wonders for a young quarterback, especially when you're talking about adding a guy to a wide receiver group with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. Yeah, it might make the Luke McCaffrey pick look a little bit kind of like a waste at that point. But, you're still looking at a guy that can still get on the field as a wide receiver, can still take snaps out of the backfield, can still contribute in special teams. I don't think they're going to make a move for Ayuk, but I would like to see it. But that's not to discredit Luke. More so just saying, I don't really know how they plan to use him. So it's kind of hard to judge what I think, the value is at pick 67. But considering that that's the top 100 pick that they highly coveted, they got to accumulated a bunch of them. I'm going to assume that they see a vision for him, in the offense. So I can say that I'm happy but uncertain about I don't want to say happy but uncertain. I would just say uncertain. It could be a great pick. It could be a depth pick. Time will tell. I mean, that's the case with every draft pick, right? So moving on, we are finally outside of the top 100 picks for the Commanders. Their next pick, round 5, pick 139, was Jordan McGee, a linebacker out of Temple. I love that they have added a good bit of talent to the linebacking groups this year, or this offseason, excuse me. It's obviously been a major weak point for the Commanders since the Rivera regime. And a lot of people talked about it. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but it really was kind of puzzling considering that Ron and Del Rio were linebackers and defensive guys. I understand that they had their own vision, but you would think that two linebackers and two defensive guys would realize that you still need linebackers in today's game. They might not be used in the same capacity, but they're definitely needed. It was evident. And, I love that they've revamped this unit. They went out and they got Bobby Wagner, a great veteran leader he can still produce. He's not just going to be on the sidelines with pom-poms and a clipboard now. I don't really know what McGee's path is to being a starter or anything. They still got Jamin Davis, not quite the same. Hopefully, Jamin Davis outside, McGee might be more of like a, middle field general, defensive field general. But I would like to see maybe like Jamin get a little more action off the edge. I could clear some room for people to move around and maybe get McGee on the field. But I like the pick. But again, once you get outside of the fourth round, you're not really looking at guys that you're expecting to start or maybe start. It's nice when you find some late round gems like a Cam Curl in the sixth, but it's not obviously the norm. It's not what's expected. So once you get kind of, like I said, outside that fourth round, it starts to become murky and trying to say, hey, I think this guy is going to do this or that. So we'll say I'm happy that they continue to add to the linebacking group, and I think that just the night and day difference we're going to see is going to be phenomenal, and it's going to make the decision to ignore the position for 4 years even more mind-boggling. But moving on, the Commanders have they had 2 picks left at this point, and with pick 161 they chose safety Dominique Hampton out of Washington. Again, we're towards the tail end of the draft where you're kind of drafting guys that you're like, maybe I can get something out of him if I coach him up this way or that way, or I like the raw talents. He could really be a dominant player with the right set of circumstances, right? So I think his path to making the team is going to be kind of tough. We don't have a ton back there at safety, but they went out and got Jeremy Chin. They have Quan Martin, who kind of was a tweener last year, a little bit of corner, a little bit of safety. His tape at safety was substantially better, in my opinion. So, obviously, I don't think he's a lock. He's going to have to earn it. But between those two, I don't really see a major path for Hampton to make any noise as a rookie. But that doesn't mean he won't make the roster, especially be a special teams contributor. But last but certainly not least, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, defensive end out of Notre Dame. Kind of in the same boat as Hampton, where I don't want to say there's anybody that's like a guaranteed lock, but there's a lot of bodies ahead of him. So he has a hill to climb, to even make the roster, let alone see any action, regular season. These guys might be more like practice squad or camp guys. But they were not done there. For undrafted free agents, they brought in 11 of them. And again, we're going to see a lot of their vision. And what that vision really was is, hey, we want to get as many new bodies in here as possible. So not only did they come away with, 9 draft picks, but they also come away with 11 more undrafted free agents. And we heard a lot about a couple of these guys. They offered the most signing bonus, the most this money. They really wanted to get these guys in. They really want to help establish and build a new culture. And those 11 guys, 2 of them are CBs. We got 2 safeties, 2 running backs, a quarterback, a tackle, a defensive tackle, and a wide receiver. So any area that it's like, hey, we might have needed some help in, but we didn't really get a guy that we were comfortable taking with our, any of our picks. They got some more camp bodies to provide some more competition. And overall, super pleased with the draft. Obviously, time will tell with anything, and once camp rolls around, we'll start to get a better idea of how the roster is going to shake out and where guys are going to fall. But I would not be shocked. Obviously, we know JD is going to be out there week one, but I wouldn't be shocked. I think we also know that Mike's going to be out there. Sandra Still is going to be out there. So I think you can at least say two of those guys are kind of already hinted at being locks. But I still think that Ben and Brandon as well could be four total draft picks starting for you. And I think that that's a really big win. I mean, again, what kind of season they have determines if it continues to be a win. But if these guys play and they play well, Adam Peters looking like he killed it in his first draft in Washington. So again, super pumped. I cannot wait for camp to start. As we start to inch closer to the season, we'll try to maybe start taking some cracks and some swings at some win-loss predictions. But until then, I will see you guys next time, and let me know again how you're feeling about the draft in the comments below, and anything on Twitter, let me know.